Welcome everyone. I'm just allowing a few more minutes for people to join the webinar today, and then we'll make a start. Okay. So welcome to this webinar today with the University of Wolverhampton and our guests Polaris. They're here to talk to you today about the independent review on children's social care, supporting young people transitioning out of care and into university education for care leavers as well. So we're going to have some discussion around that. I just need to advise everyone before we start that we are on a public platform today, so all information is shared and the webinar is being recorded and will be available to watch to everyone after the event as well. Questions for the session today, if they can be asked through the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens, we will ensure that we aim to answer your questions at the end of the session. No attendees will be invited to speak and all raised hands will be lowered. So any questions should always just go through the Q&A box today. Now I'm going to hand over to Hannah Hackney from Polaris to give you an overview of the agenda and introduce you to everyone in the panel today. My name is Jenny Davis and I'll be coming back and joining Hannah for some questions towards the end of the webinar and going through your question and answers for you. Thanks very much. Over to you, Hannah.
Thank you, Jenny. Hello, my name's Hannah and I'm a senior social worker and learning and development lead at Polaris. I have experience working with young people who have been fostered and also young people transitioning onto staying put arrangements. Today I will just go through exactly what we're going to be covering. So we'll be looking at the proposed changes to the care review regarding the implications of the recommendations which broadens corporate parenting responsibilities and what that would mean for care leavers going to university, and the recommendation that there should be a range of housing options to support young people transitioning out of care, and looking at that being extended to the age of 23 and with an opt-out rather than opt-in expectation. And today the panel brings together foster parents, those who look after young people on staying put, and the care experienced. So if I can first introduce you to Chris, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then following that, Ruth, and then Greg, and then we can start. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Chris Hoyle. I'm 36. I spent many of my formative years in foster care, and I've spent most of my professional career working in higher education, where I do a range of activities. Mainly I do data analysis looking at equality data. I do some lecturing, and I was also instrumental in the University of York's development of their care experience offer.
Hello, I'm Ruth. I'm a quality assurance and safeguarding auditor, and I am also the apprenticeship coordinator for Polaris. But prior to that, I was foster carer with FCA for 11 years. My young person that I looked after from the age of 8 made an informed decision that she would like to stay put with me. So for me, that meant my fostering career would end, because I know she still needed support to remain in college, to remain with her part-time job, to remain learning to drive and to have all the opportunities still there for her. So I'm no longer a foster carer, and I was lucky enough to gain a position with Polaris when I resigned from fostering.
Hi, I'm Greg Mutimer, a foster carer. I've been foster caring for 6 years now, and we've just said goodbye to our young person who was living with us under the staying put scheme. So him and his brother were with us for 6-7 years, and he stayed with us until just before his 20th birthday. Definitely needed that extra time just to get used to adulting and that transition from being a young person to an adult. So that's my experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks all. So then, if we can start with the first line of discussion. So the care review recommended that there should be a range of housing options for young care experienced people. So that's staying put, staying close arrangements and supported lodgings, with an opt-out rather than opt-in expectation. How realistic do you think it is when we understand that there is a shortage of foster parents and people to support people when they're leaving care?
Shall I go first?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I should have probably mentioned in my introduction, I was also on the Experts by Experience board for the Independent Review of Children's Social Care. I forgot about that a little bit. I think when you look at the recommendations of the review, you have to take them holistically. They're not individual recommendations designed to be implemented individually. They're designed to be implemented as a whole package. And I think we've already heard today, just in the introductions, how some of the current system forces foster carers to stop fostering. And some of that is the way that it's set up as transactional relationships, short-term relationships. And I think that the review rightfully recognise that that's not necessarily why people become foster carers. It's not what they dream of when they think of fostering. Nobody really comes into fostering to have a very short-term relationship with a young person and give them a bit of safety until they move on to the next place. I think most foster carers would agree with me that they come because they want to give love and stability and security to people who are wholly deserving of that for a lifetime. And I think that when we look at the review's recommendations, having a range of housing options, having it operate in the way that the review recommends as a holistic package, I think is more attractive to people to be foster carers. I think it's more closely aligned with what people want. And I think we've heard today, just in the introductions, that it definitely is, that people don't come into fostering to do those short-term things. They come in for that lifelong relationship. And whilst these recommendations don't necessarily recommend a lifelong relationship, they go much further in promoting that. I think it's a really positive step should it be implemented.
I would just like to add that very often, as Chris said, it is the foster carer that holds that important relationship and connection with the young person. So ultimately, for me, I was very much driven by what was best for them, because becoming 18, all the vocab changes for them, from being looked after to going independent. There's different funding options available, and all the language can be very overwhelming. And when they're not ready for it, it's not positive for them.
Yeah, I would agree with Ruth. I think when our young person turned 18, despite everything we were doing to try and prepare him for adulthood at that age, he wasn't ready. We talk a lot in training of foster carers about regression, and you see the regression in young people. The theory behind that, you listen to and you think, oh yeah, that makes sense. When you see it in reality, it's a whole different ball game. And you realise just how much these young people need that extra support. So yeah, I think our young person definitely wasn't ready. And as Ruth said, the sudden change in language really throws them sometimes. And I think having that extra couple of years with us for our young person to get used to the idea of what that language meant and what the support there was really important. And I think also the fact that over the 6 years that he was with us, he had 9 different local authority social workers. So that bond was never really formed with any of them. So to have us there as his sort of comfort support to guide and support was really important.
I think also when we're talking about our young people becoming 18, it's really important they have the opportunities to make an informed decision. So what I really pushed for during LAC reviews was my young person to be able to view a range of housing options that were available, so they could see what it actually meant, what it'd feel like, before they could just say, oh, well, I'll stay. I think that was quite key. And so although they are 18 and they're an adult and they can make their own decisions, they're very much buying into wanting to stay put because they can see maybe living independently, having all this responsibility to pay bills, etc., get themselves to college isn't necessarily what they know deep down they're able to do.
And do you think, Ruth, that your young person knew all of the options available to them, or were you keen that really?
Well, I was keen that because during the LAC, I would attend obviously the LAC reviews every 6 months, and I made sure it stayed on the agenda that we could go and have a look at some semi-supported accommodation, which we did do, and then also we did. I did a little bit of work with her so we could understand that and what that meant. We also had a look at renting a room in a private house. Although we didn't go and view a room, we had a look at what that would cost, what the bills were, etc., that you would have to pay every month. And then we also spoke to her young person's advisor about looking at council property options. And then we put them all down on a piece of paper just to get an understanding of what it meant, what it would cost every month. So she could also see what the best option was. Also, I have to say, when my young person turned 18, they'd just started the second year of their post-16 education. So it's really important that there was consistency for her so she could carry on and continue with it, because by completing the course she's done has given her some amazing opportunities.
And I think Ruth's just raised a great point, that the traditional transitions within children's social care are not really set up with other systems that young people are going through at the time. So you think around the transition at 16, which is a large transition and a whole change of vocabulary, that often comes during people's GCSE years. And then we wonder why care experienced people underperform at GCSE. And then you have a transition again at 18. Whilst most young people aren't worrying about their housing options or finances or budgeting or any of these things, they're worried about which university they're going to pick and how they're going to do on their A-levels. And extending things in an opt-out system allows care experienced young people to have a journey that's more comparable to their peers, where they have less worries, they have less practical matters to deal with, and they can focus on what they want to achieve in life and where they want to be. And I think it's a really positive step.
When you say they have that decision to make, it's good that they have that decision to make, because along their journey of being looked after, a lot of decisions are made for them. So it's important, as you rightly say, that they have that decision to make.
Also, with regards to that, I think, you know, the very nature of the system at the moment, it's your 18th birthday, you need to make your decision by then. It does fall within a lot of the other things, as Chris was saying. And I know definitely, both from my experience with our young person, but also from having been a teacher for 20 odd years working in high schools with sixth forms, I've seen young people in care who, you know, are on track to do really well through their first year of A-level, and then they hit their second year and they're having all of this thrown at them, and suddenly, you know, education is not the most important thing for them. So I think any transition that moves that from 18 to a point at which they're not in a really important year that's going to shape the rest of their life is a really positive thing.
I wonder, can I pop in, Jenny and Hannah? Is that?
Of course. Sorry, Elaine, we didn't introduce you. This
Oh,
is
no.
from the
No
University
worries.
of Wolverhampton.
Yeah, I'm from the University of Wolverhampton. I'm actually at the West Midlands Teaching Partnership Conference today, and the Chief Social Worker for Children's and the Chief Social Worker for Adults have both been speaking today. And one of the things the Chief Social Worker for Children's has just been talking about is the changes to their care review, or the proposed changes, and some of the reasoning laying behind that. And I wondered what people were thinking about. One of the words she was talking about a lot, and people have talked about transitions, and they've talked about being ready to make decisions and being asked to make decisions that people who are living in their family may not be asked to make, like looking for a home or trying to make all these decisions at that time in their lives. But one of the things she was talking about was the importance of the use of the word love in the recommendations and the reports, and trying to centre that much more in our thoughts about care or staying put or being looked after, or all of the terminology that goes around children's social work. And I just wondered what people thought, because I know when we met in a pre-discussion, I think that was one of the things that people were coming almost, I think, touching on, was actually the love they felt for their foster children, and wanting to support people to have a good life and be able to make good decisions. I just wondered what people thought about that, really.
Can I start on that one? I think, again, when we look at fostering, we also talk about a lot about placement stability and ensuring your placement is, you know, giving them that stable routine, and you see through all the ups and downs, and it's like a time thing. The longer you're together, I mean, I could never have imagined my young person not still being part of my life, and I'm not being part of her life. I mean, I look to my young person as she's my daughter anyway, and she very much views me as her mum. So yeah, our relationship is very much built on love. And I also think, just as a foster carer generally, I've put in lots of effort, my young person's put in lots of effort, why you'd want, just because somebody is 18, why you'd want to jeopardize it or lose all the good that's been done.
Sorry, go on, Chris.
Oh, thanks, mate. I think it's absolutely the right discussion to have when we look at fostering. I'll put my cards on the table. I've said I'm 36. I still have foster carers. They're called Trevor and May, and they're nanny and granddad to my son. They sat at the top table at my wedding. They are and forever will be in my life. I'm extremely grateful for that. And I think sometimes we can overlook the privileges that we have in life. And I think something that they've provided to me throughout my life is that feeling of security. And I think most of us have that, and we don't really appreciate what it is. But for me, I know if I'm ever in trouble, if I get divorced, if I lose my house, if I go to jail, if anything horrible happens in my life, I pick up the phone to my foster mum, and first of all, she'll tell me off for not ringing her enough, absolutely, but she'll always help. And I know that down to my core. I know that she'd never see me homeless. There'd always be a floor, sofa, bed for me. She'd always be there for advice. If I asked her, she'd always be there for childcare. And then, like I say, actually, when I was getting married, I didn't actually have someone for those seats if it wasn't my foster parents, which would have made my wedding rather weird. But having them there made it rather lovely. And that's something that they've provided to me. That's love. It's a relationship built up over a long time where I have confidence in them and they have confidence in me. And it's something that's properly invaluable in life. And I don't think people appreciate just how much that gives you.
Yeah, I think for us, we came into fostering and we weren't really 100% sure how it was going to pan out and what was going to happen. But 6 or so years on now, our 2 lads that we fostered, the young person who's just left us and his brother, yeah, very much will always be part of the family. And I think that love isn't just love that we share with the boys, it's our extended family as well. You know, my mum and dad and my partner's parents very much involved in the boys' lives. They, at this point, probably get to hear more about the boys than we do. We get those calls when, oh, we're short of money, could you just lend us this? Or, oh, we've just popped round, oh, is it dinner time? Here's my washing. That's the bit we get. Grandparents get visits and, you know, and get to treat the boys. But I think that's absolutely the way it should be. It's the way I was with my parents and my grandparents. So there's no reason why it shouldn't be that way with our 2. And I think talking about love in these transitional periods, the very first conversation we had with both of our boys was, you've got a home here forever. It's your choice. We can help you and make sure it's an informed choice, but you know that this is your home forever. It's up to you at what point you want to try and sort of fly the nest and give it a go, either on your own or in supported lodgings, whatever. So yeah, I think it's a great statement there from Elaine, that we've been talking about the practicalities of things, but love is very much at the centre of everything we do with our young people, isn't it?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Greg. I mean, for my young person, our extended family and what we would have called our support network still have a lot of input with my young person, and my young person will, you know, make an effort to visit them, see them, text message and share her life with them as she has prior to being an adult. So that's always really good to see. And in fact, the first person, when she had just come back from her TUI role in Tunisia, the first person she actually made a lunch arrangement to see was my mother-in-law, which was really lovely to see.
I do wonder how often, when Greg says they ask to borrow money, I wonder how often he gets paid back. But I think the other thing that is worth mentioning is that obviously I spent most of my youth in foster care, and prior to coming into foster care, I'd not really seen what a positive parenting relationship was and what a positive expression of love was. And I think that's something that my foster parents taught to me, that cuddles are important, like, you know, kiss on the cheek, all of those things. Actually, showing love and showing affection is an important part of parenting. And now that's something that I get to pass on to my son. Probably too much when he tries to lick my face rather than kiss it. But without them showing and modelling that, I wouldn't have that now. And I think that's a lovely little benefit of it as well.
Thank you. Thanks all for sharing that, all that. The next on the agenda is the recommendation that staying put and staying close should be a legal entitlement and extended to the age of 23. And I think based on these discussions, you would probably all agree 23 and beyond. Has anyone got any thoughts on that?
Well, I just think that it takes the worry away from them. And for me, I'm up for supporting as long as needed. And to be honest, I don't believe that's always driven by age.
No, and it is actually 2 years below the national average age of people moving out. It's probably way higher than 25, actually, isn't it? People are living at home for longer now because of the cost of living, the cost of renting and mortgages. It's difficult, isn't it, to get on the ladder and to actually move. So it just makes it a little bit harder, doesn't it, for care experienced people?
I think it does, and I think there's a lot of research out there to show that care experienced people, when we talk about university, care experienced people are more likely to attend university later in life. And we see some horrible statistics when we look at by the 19th birthday, which is a traditional way of measuring participation in higher education. But when you look at those by the age of 30, actually the gap shortens quite a lot. We see that care experienced people may take longer than their peers to go through traditional life paths, but when they're well supported to do that, then they can achieve extremely well. If you look at their outcomes for degrees based on their qualifications prior to entering, they actually outperform their peers. So anything that extends the period that young people have to find themselves, to find what they want to be in life, and to find the path of how to do that, I think is a really positive thing. I'd still, if I'm honest, I'd like to see it be a less final thing. And I think this is something that we see in transitions. As I've said, I've always got a sofa that I can go to. My child will always have a sofa that they can go to. And I think we've heard from Ruth and Greg exactly the same, that their young people will always have somewhere, they will always have someone. And it doesn't really matter what that formal relationship is. It would be very positive to see that in a more formalised way, that the young people can make these transitions, can see if they're for them, and if they're not, they can revert back. And I think that's something that I'd really like to see happen there.
Yeah, I think with our young people in particular, when they left us, they were both working, could deal with finances, could cook healthily, or just for Chris, never any expectation of being paid back. But you accept that, don't you? But yeah, I think having the opportunity to stay put and knowing that that's there until after sort of traditional leaving university age is a really strong message for young people, that they're safe and secure and they can, value their education without having other concerns. I would hate to have thought that my parents, when I turned 18 or 21, said, okay, there you go, out into the real world, without any support at that point. And I know that's not what we do as foster carers, but that's sort of the way the system is set up, isn't it? So I think the move to 23 is really good. It doesn't mean that people have to stay, but it gives people the opportunity to move when they're ready, as opposed to when they're being told by social services or whatever that it's time. I think the other key thing is it enables us, not in a 1984 kind of a fashion, but in a caring manner, to be able to keep a closer eye on them as well, and to be able to offer that support day to day, rather than they get to a point where they're in trouble and, oh, do I call, don't I call? Because I know I'm going to be told off and I don't want to be told off, but I know that the support will be there afterwards. And I think just having the opportunity to be close or staying put for longer just enables us to maybe avoid them falling into some of the traps that young people do when they first move out on their own. Also, and I certainly don't want to make any generalizations, but with the personal advisor that our young person has, they're fairly regularly telling them, oh, you don't want to be working yet because, you know, oh, you're much better off if we're paying your rent and if we're giving you some money for this. If you start working, you'll probably be no better off. And that's something that I find absolutely horrific. You know, we've brought the boys up to take pride in themselves and to work and to give back to society. But if somebody is telling you, oh, just sit there and play on your Xbox and we'll pay for everything, I don't think that that is supporting them into becoming adults. And if they were at home for longer, we could make sure that, you know, they're working and that they're enjoying some of the money that they get to earn, and it's not all going on bills and rent and so on. You know, and I'm not speaking for foster carers and all staying put carers, but, you know, we were quite happy when he started working to say, well, don't worry about paying your contribution this week, you go and enjoy yourself, or actually you've been saving for that, here you go, have some money towards that so you can get it a bit sooner, and just sort of supporting and giving that positive reinforcement to working. So I think extending the period that they can officially stay is all the better. But it's a personal thing, isn't it? So different people are going to be ready to move on at different points. But yeah.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, if we move on to the next part of the agenda. So in terms of university life for a care experienced person, Chris, would you mind sharing your experience? And what about encouraging people who are care experienced to actually inform the university and, you know, in their UCAS application? What are the benefits for young people in reporting that?
So I'll start with my experience of actually going to university. It was quite a while ago now. And the reason I say that is the system's totally changed. But to give my experience, I was the first care leaver from my local authority to attend university after the Leaving Care Act, which was 5 years after the Leaving Care Act came into place, to give you an idea of some statistics there. I think it's fair to say that neither my local authority nor my university quite knew what to do there. I think they were both very good in trying to figure it out within the context that they operated at the time. But there were still many challenges. So when I was at work and I was in a senior meeting, I was talking about how the university made me homeless 3 times in my first year. And I think that gives a really good idea of how badly systems were set up at the time. If you don't offer 365-day-a-year accommodation, you cannot expect care experienced people to come to your university because you'll make them homeless. That is the be-all and end-all of it. I was very lucky. My local authority were great. They supported me really well. And I had a good support network around me. And I think that's how I survived. That is the be-all and end-all. I think luckily we now operate in a very different environment. I think in terms of ticking the box on the UCAS form, you absolutely must do it. It will not be shared beyond the people that need to know it in order to support you appropriately. But that's exactly what it's used for. It's used to identify people that might need support, might need additional funding, might need 365-day-a-year accommodation, those kind of things. That's what the box is there for. I won't talk about my day job of cleansing that data because that's a whole different story. But it was a huge step forward when UCAS introduced it, because it allowed universities to access that kind of information, to know who might be care experienced before they arrived at the university. to be able to prioritise their applications, to be able to prioritise support for them, to be able to prioritise accommodation allocations for them. That box is absolutely essential, and any foster carers who have young people who are thinking of going to university, you may not know much about the UCAS form. Frankly, I don't anymore because it's been such a long time and I don't deal with it in my day job. But you do know that that box exists. That box is on the form and they absolutely have to tick it. It is imperative that they do. I think we see lots of universities now offering huge packages of support, huge levels of support for young people attending university. I'm sure we'll go into some of those in detail. But they are dependent on the university knowing that the student is care experienced. I've never, ever in my time seen anyone discuss that or talk about it in any kind of derogatory sense. There is no stigma attached to ticking that box. It is universities, I think they always have, but certainly these days, really wish to be positive forces for society. They want, the point of university is to transform lives at the end of the day. Sure, we do great research and all of that kind of stuff, but the purpose of us is to transform lives, and that's what we want to do. And to do that, we need to know what difficulties young people may face so that we can help them overcome them.
Yeah, and like you say, it is confidential, isn't it? And I also read that they don't require evidence for that either. It's just a case of ticking it, isn't it?
This is why I'm not talking about cleansing that data. I think some people do tick that box incorrectly and don't understand what it actually asks for. But yes, it doesn't require evidence. I think it's worth pointing out that there are support packages, there are systems within universities that do require evidence, and that varies across various universities and systems. I think the one that everybody will come into contact with is the student loans company. Student loans company do require evidence, and that's because it allows you to access enhanced packages of support. But the UCAS box itself doesn't, and it doesn't for very good reasons. And that is, first of all, it's more holistic than some other definitions. So it's literally asking you, have you spent any time in care at all? That's what it's aiming to do. And therefore it doesn't require any body of evidence. What will happen as a result of ticking that box is that the university may reach out to the applicant and they may explain what support is in place, what bursaries, what scholarships are available, what accommodation options. And to access some of those, you may require evidence. Thankfully, a lot of institutions have now moved away from relying on the student loans company, and therefore may be more flexible in what kind of evidence can be provided for that. So it may be that actually, rather than having any evidence from social work, if there's not an existing relationship there between the young person and the service, that actually a teacher may be able to vouch for that. And many universities will be very flexible about how they allow you to evidence your experience.
Thanks, Chris.
My experience is regarding higher education with my young person. It's very much driven by the local authorities often, because virtual school was very much wanting to attend PEP meetings, and they were able to advise my young person that if it was a higher education route they were looking to sort of take up, there was lots of different support packages different universities offered, and it is something that, although higher education is something she considered, she certainly deferred it for this year. But they're explaining that, you know, it could be things as simple as so many train tickets home every term, to see your family or your foster family, just, and lots of different support throughout the universities to be able to continue with their study, whether that be financial or whether that be academic. So
just to give an example, the train tickets thing is interesting, because I've seen local authorities provide train tickets but not provide accommodation at the other end, which is a really interesting thing to do. But to give an example of what support can look like at a university. So at the University of York, I worked for a long time with senior management to create what we think is a very holistic package of support. So some of those things are free accommodation for the duration of your degree, suitcases to transport your belongings, train tickets, VIP open days, graduation packages. They can include storage of belongings when you go for year abroad or you're in industries, bespoke careers advice, priority access to campus jobs. The level of support can be huge for care experienced people. Why you must tick the box.
And I think also, I mean, that's an amazing package that Chris has just described there. But I think just in terms of the basic day-to-day stuff, you know, the residential life advisors that I'm sure all universities have now, and the security teams and so on, just having that knowledge that a young person is care experienced could mean something as simple as just the residential life advisor just popping in every now and then and just checking up, just so that that young person has a face and a point of contact, somebody that they can trust whilst they're there, is really important. And just being able to, you know, send them emails to say, oh, this event's coming up, you might be interested in that. And just them feeling like they belong again, because let's face it, throughout their lives, they haven't always felt that. For our two boys, we were their third set of foster carers, which, you know, in and of itself came with its own issues. And it took a long time for them to learn to trust us. And if you are on campus dealing with loads and loads of different people, are you going to bother as a young person? Whereas if you have that one point of contact, you know that the residential life advisor is there, or the team of residential life advisors are there, and they're there to support you, and it's all done in a way that doesn't highlight you and separate you out. It's an amazing thing. So, you know, as well as all the financial support and the other bits, just having something like that there and having your point of contact is really valuable.
And I was just going to say, Hannah, I think some of the other support as well, building on that around, you know, perhaps if there are other student groups that you might want to join or you can become aware of, that just allow you to perhaps meet other people who are having similar experiences, or, and again, just gain some support and create networks. So yeah, I would say it's important to tick that box, because I think it is a way of accessing support and help, not necessarily about labeling yourself, but about being able to get that support and access, and to make your experience a better and more positive one at university.
I just want to completely wholeheartedly agree. Certainly at York and many other institutions I've looked at, there are specific social events that are arranged periodically for what we will be talking about with care experienced people, but generally independent students, that's including estranged students, to come together to do positive activities, to go out for a meal or an escape room or go bowling, the kind of things that a good youth worker would do with young people. But to allow them to form relationships on their own terms between each other. And that's so massively important, because as universities, we try very, very hard to support these young people specifically in every way that we can. But there are times where actually our systems and processes are just not that good at doing that, regardless of how hard we try. A really good example of that is Christmas, where most of the university shuts down. But when I've seen young people who are care experienced form those relationships, they become such a great support network over that Christmas period, because they're in the same boat. They get together, they have Christmas meals together on Christmas Day, they share presents, they do normal Christmassy things, but with their chosen family. And just to pick up on a point that Greg said, I don't know which university you're talking about, but it sounds great. Because what Greg's talking about there is all staff being aware of what care experience is. And that's so important. I specifically got permission to share this story today because I thought that we might talk about it. But there's an editor at, oh, is she an editor? I'm going to call her an editor at Wonky, for those of us who work in the universities world, who is care experienced. And during their time at university, less than a decade ago, they were in university over Christmas, and the university shut down the heating to the halls over the Christmas period, and just for fun, also closed all the offices. And that left that young person in a very precarious position, is what we'll call that. But that was all staff not having an awareness of what care experience is, and therefore not thinking about it. Not what I always say to universities if I'm working with them is, what we want is for you to hold us in mind. Think about us. We can't ask for more than that. If you think about us, you'll probably make positive decisions on our behalf, but do hold us in mind. That's impossible if your staff don't know who we are. They can't hold us in mind. And I hope that one of the very positive changes that we'll see as a result of the review is that whole staff training being delivered, so that everyone across the whole university at least has some tangential knowledge of what care experience is.
Yeah, just going back to the residential life advisors, that there are 24/7, 365 day a year provision. So if something like that happened where I will just shut down the heating to save some money for the university over Christmas, there is constantly somebody available that can deal with it. They may not be able to deal with it instantly, but they've got the access to get to the people that can. And things like Christmas dinners, they're organised, so there's events that go on at our local university all the way through the holiday periods, whether it's Christmas, the summer, or Easter. So there's always something available for not just for the care experienced, for international students, or for anyone that's estranged, or anyone that for whatever reason isn't going home. So to have that capacity, my assumption was that probably all universities at this stage had something similar, but that may well not be the case.
I love your positive outlook, Greg. But I think it's fair to say that
Naive.
Naive. That's the word you chose, not me. I think Christmas in particular is something that universities could massively improve on how they support care experienced students. I think the practical aspects of it, the heating's not going to be turned off. That was a while ago. We're better than that now. And most universities, I'd hope, would help arrange at the very least 365 day a year accommodation. But I think something that universities need to think more about as they look at how they support these students is not just about that practical aspect, but about the feelings involved in it. And I think Christmas is a really good example of that. I know from my day job that most students who withdraw from university do it in their first term or by the end of the Christmas holiday. And traditionally, you'll have an assessment period after the Christmas holiday. And if we don't put good support in place for these people at university, what we're basically saying is have a hugely traumatic event happen for you, your first Christmas away from your foster family or wherever you used to live, and now go and perform in your exams. And when you look at it like that, it's not setting them up to succeed. I think a lot of universities can do more. And I think, like you point out, Greg, it's not just about these students. It's about any student who's living on campus during Christmas. That's your international cohort, that's your estranged students. It's any student who, for any reason, has to stay on campus. That can either be a time that they look on badly, or it can be a time where they really appreciate that you, as a university, are really thinking about them and their specific circumstances. And we talked previously about building of relationships. It's a huge step to building a positive relationship between your support services and care experience students.
I think also with moving, staying put to 23, obviously, you've also got hopefully a lot more young care experienced people who are going to be travelling back to their foster families for Christmas anyway. I know our two boys were with us over Christmas, initially asking us if they could stay for a couple of days, and once they got settled in again, maybe for a bit longer. But I think if young people are aware that they've got this extra time, then possibly they're going to be more able and feel more confident and comfortable in returning to their homes over Christmas, which hopefully would have a really positive impact as well.
Thank you. So I'll just have a question off the agenda now. So what are your thoughts around the recommendation that new legislation should be passed to broaden corporate parenting responsibilities? So not just the local authority, but other organisations playing a role in delivering and offering services to care leavers?
Inject it into my veins. I am so looking forward to the implementation of this recommendation. It's something that I push for as part of my place on the Experts by Experience board. It is a well-evidenced recommendation. It has been in practice for a decade in Scotland now. I think it's huge. I think for universities, it makes care experienced people a very special category of people. And to give it a bit of background, universities we have a regulator called the Office for Students, and the Office for Students asked all universities to come up with what's called an access and participation plan, essentially outlining how we were going to try and support various groups that struggle to access higher education over 5 years. And care leavers were one of the priority groups as part of that. There are only a handful of Russell groups that put any kind of target in there to do with care leavers. Whilst they were a priority group, they weren't really a priority group is probably a fair way of describing the outcome of that. I think what we've seen in Scotland as a result of that extension of corporate parenting responsibilities to institutions is that thing that I just said, that universities in Scotland hold us in mind. Think about us, have senior management come around a table specifically to discuss us and to think about what life might be like for us and how their systems and processes are set up and whether they work for us. You see a lot of how that transpires in Scotland as bringing care experienced students into those kind of rooms, around those kind of tables, paying them for their time and expertise, but getting that expertise, and as a result of that, massively changing the outcomes of care experienced people in Scotland. I think the other lovely benefit of corporate parenting in Scotland or in Scottish universities is Scottish universities looking as a sector rather than as an individual institution about what life is like for care experienced people, and how by coming together as institutions and as governing bodies that we can see huge instrumental changes. So a couple of examples of my favourite things from Scotland, and I have a really long list of this, but a care experience bursary that's paid over 12 months, that's comprehensive. That is that care experienced people in Scotland who access higher education and meet various definition things will receive a large bursary that's provided by the funding body rather than by the individual institution. And that means that they have a far lower debt when they exit. And we don't see that in England. That's not the system that we currently have in England. What we see is that those who are poorest leave universities with the largest debts. And that's not quite a great system there. The other thing that I really love that Scotland have done is that they have what they call, I want to say minimum criteria for success. What is essentially is that universities have to look at each of their courses and decide what are the minimum grades that they can take a student, and that student will have a good chance of succeeding. If you're care experienced and you meet those grades, they have to guarantee you a place. That is a huge difference from the English system, where the very best that you'll see in England is what we call contextual offers, where we'll take the typical offer that we want to give for a course and we'll lower it by a grade, 2 if you're very, very lucky. And that's how the English system works. The Scottish system is set up so very differently. The Scottish system is set up to say, we are the parents of these people here, and we want to be good, pushy parents, as we would be for our own children. And whilst it's not possible for us to say that we love all of these children, we're going to act like we do. We're going to act like we love them. We're going to think about what we could do if they were our children. And that is the introduction of corporate parenting to universities in Scotland. It has been huge, humongous. It's a lovely thing to see. It is well evidenced. It's happened for a decade. You can go on to University of Scotland and you can read the corporate parenting plans for each of the institutions that they have to create. You can also read the updates on what impact those changes have had to care experienced people in Scotland. It's long overdue for English higher education, and I'm really looking forward to it.
That answered the next question that I was going to ask, really. Speaking of Scotland and what they do there. And it's really nice that you said, you know, we're going to fight with these children as we would our own, because that's exactly what Len Sissy says in his TED talk, isn't it, when he speaks of his care experience and the importance of love and touch and being advocated for. So absolutely. Is there anything else that you think that universities and fostering agencies could do to support care leavers in education?
God, yes. I think some of the best practice I've seen in institutions, there's huge bursaries and all of those kind of stuff, and that is great, and it is. The reality is that most care experienced people who get good GCSEs progress to university. They progress at a better rate than their peers. There's a lot that universities, with all of our might, with our professors, with our PhD students sitting around us, can do to improve educational outcomes. I think one of those things is we often talk about aspirations. You get aspirations from experiences, from seeing things, from seeing people around you have those kind of experiences, those jobs, those roles, from believing that they're achievable. So to give a really practical example of good practice that I've seen was when I worked at York, we had a relationship that had open dialogue between us and local authorities that surrounded us. And that led to conversations that you wouldn't otherwise have. And so it happened by accident, but North Yorkshire County Council were looking to host an event to celebrate successes of their young people up to the age of 18. And these were successes that were on the young people's terms. So, you know, a successful one young person might just be getting out of bed every day. That might be a huge success for them. And they were celebrating on those terms. And they had lovely trophies made for them all. And it was a really lovely day full of nice activities for them. And they had a problem with the venue. The venue fell through. Now, we don't know much about university, or we might not know much about universities, but we all know we've got massive lecture halls and lots of them. And so as a university, because we were having conversations with our local authorities around us, we were able to step in there and say, we've got plenty of space. Do you want to bring your young people to campus? And we'll give you the space for free and we'll subsidise the catering for you. And that allowed the local authority to do that. What that meant was for that day, we had 150 care experienced people on campus. That is very, very rare as an institution. On bespoke days that we might arrange, we'd have less than 5. But we had 150 people, and we brought them to a university. We allowed them to see a university, but not in a way that was very pushy. It was just, you're coming here to do something else. That then led to many, many conversations as those young people departed campus, and in the following weeks between them and the people that they trusted, about accessing education, about what support might be available. It allowed those young people to see themselves doing it, and had a really positive effect. It's now a model of practice that is maintained. If the local authorities around York need a venue, and there's going to be care experience people there, they will pick up the phone to the university as their first point of call, because it'll be provided for free, because it doesn't cost the university anything to do that, given enough notice and enough space. But it does allow young people to have experiences that raise their aspirations. And that's what it's got to be about. It's got to be about allowing young people to see it at an earlier point in their lives, or at a later point in their lives, realizing that they haven't missed that opportunity, that universities are flexible and are open to them, and that have a huge range of support to allow them to get to where they want to be, things like foundation years or summer school activities, those kind of things.
Thank you. That really echoes in with what Greg was saying about raising aspirations, and I just wondered if you think fostering agencies have a bigger role there. You know, if an advisor is saying to a young person, you know, you don't have to work, you don't want to miss out on any of your benefits or anything like that. Is there the more that fostering agencies could be doing to help raise aspirations? Because obviously the nature of some foster placements and foster carers, it's not always a long-term situation. And thinking of some of the young people I've worked with, where they have been to many different foster care placements, and then they've gone home, and then they've gone back into foster care placements, and for them, you know, their self-esteem is really low, and their aspirations are really low as well. So I'm just wondering what your views are on that, really.
Yeah, at Polaris we do, because we've got many fostering agencies and adoption agencies and residential schools under Polaris, we do across the board support young people to raise their aspirations through CV writing days, practice interview skills, take them on residential, like weekends away to prepare them ready for independence. Also, like, arrange careers days where employers, universities and colleges go all together in one room, which is, you know, easier for people to access lots of different organisations, isn't it, to kind of help them with their decision making. And I know one of our agencies supports young people with their driving theory tests. So I think they do like practice with them, which is really positive. But absolutely, that's just the agencies that I know of, you know, under Polaris. It would be amazing to see that just across the board with all fostering agencies and local authorities. I know local authorities will offer, you know, days, won't they, where young people can go and attend a careers event, or activities vary, don't they, during the sort of school holidays and college holidays. So there are things available, but it's whether that young person will go, that can be, you know, there will be a barrier sometimes, won't there, to that person wanting to go. But when they've got full support of their foster parents and their local authority, social worker and teachers, we would really hope that they would make that choice to go.
Yeah, I think that's an incredible thing that's being done by Polaris. I think they've got their finger in a lot of pies there, and trying to support young people in a whole host of ways. One of the things that I've kind of considered over the last couple of years, seeing both of our boys reaching that kind of age where they're finishing school and moving on, is things like partnerships with local businesses or with national businesses, whereby potentially they will either provide a mentor that can talk to the young people about getting into work, or possibly work experience, that kind of thing. I know Timpson's have a great policy around young people who are either in care or care leavers. So sort of building relationships with businesses like that, I think could be really positive. I think sometimes as the foster carer, and Chris may well agree with this coming at it from the young person's perspective, we are desperate for our young people to do as well as possible. And sometimes maybe we might nag a little bit and become white noise, because, you know, these are young people who are trying to become independent. And here we are going, oh, but what about, and you need to try, and oh, have a look at this, and oh, look at this job. And I know definitely with our two, there were points where we knew we had to kind of just back off and let them have a trial for themselves a little bit and come to us. So if you've got a professional and somebody who's distanced giving similar advice, it's a bit like as a teacher, sometimes you can spend all year saying to the young people, oh, you really need to be revising all the way through, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing that. Nothing. Somebody comes in externally to do a talk, says, oh, you want to be, and they'll come back to you, go, oh my God, well, we need to be revising right from the word go, like it's something amazing and new. So someone like a mentor might provide a really positive role model there as well.
I think Greg touched on something really important there that we've not talked about just yet, which is some of the things that universities and employers are doing to provide positive schemes for these young people that foster carers can be knowledgeable of, that universities can be knowledgeable of, and try and direct young people. So a couple of really big ones. We all saw the John Lewis advert. John Lewis do amazing work with care experienced people and offer amazing schemes and apprenticeships for them. Rightfully, Greg's pointed out Timpson's, very, very good company. We love them very much. There's also the civil service internship scheme, and that advertises every year, has a few thousand positions available, and really good positions, and often leads on to full-time proper work. And then one of the ways that you can look at all of these things is what's called the Care Leaver Covenant. If you go on the Care Leaver Covenant website, it lists organisations that have signed up and have gone through an assessment and have gone through a period of improvement. And they list all of the opportunities at that company, at that university, across several pillars of activity. So that might be a university demonstrating what they can do educationally, but then it might also be a university demonstrating what they can do as an employer. It's a really good website to access those kind of resources. I think something else that's needed, and companies like Polaris can help provide, is that that knowledge of university. So my foster parents, bless them, they didn't, as they tell me often, they didn't even get their O levels, which ages them somewhat. But they knew to nag me. It's not just white noise, Greg. They nagged me every day to get out of bed and go to college, because they knew that was important. But if I'd have gone to them for advice about university, if I wasn't able to go and look at that myself, they wouldn't have had the foggiest on what it was, how it operates, how I'd get into it, what kind of advice they could give me. And training foster carers as part of your foster carer training, just even briefly, a brief overview of the university system, UCAS, ticking the box, those kind of things can be invaluable, because it equips foster carers who either haven't had the experience or had it a very long time ago to talk more knowledgeably about what that process is, how you might access it, and what kind of support might be available.
Sorry, just jumping back in on the back of that, Chris. Some of the businesses and the civil service that you're talking about there, that's amazing. But somewhere along the line, that information gets lost at the moment. Again, it's maybe just individuals, but those are things that we never heard anything about. So maybe it's not just training of us as foster carers, but also training of the social workers and the advisors, personal advisors that are working with the young people at the same time. That's really key, so that everybody, you know, all young care experienced people are getting a level playing field in that sense.
Completely agree, Greg. Absolutely, and it's a shame that those kind of things haven't come through. I really loved the John Lewis advert, not just because it was done very well, and it was done very well, but because it raised that profile of the work that they're doing. But absolutely, the professionals that surround these young people need to know about these things. They absolutely do. And for you as foster carers, that would be where I'd assume that you would be able to most readily access that kind of information, to know that these schemes exist and to know that they're really great things. I completely agree.
I can just add, taking off my foster carers hat and maybe putting my apprenticeship hat back on. As an agency, we are looking to support our care leavers by advertising apprenticeship positions when they arise, advertising these to foster families and our participation officers. And we're hopefully going to work more closely with all of our fostering agencies, etc., residential schools, to make our young people aware of potential apprenticeships we have to offer. Also, picking up on Chris's The Care Leavers Covenant, we've just been signposted to that recently, and what we are hoping to do is see what we can do as an organisation to sign up, whether we offer a set number of workshops every year, etc. But it's definitely something we are hoping to explore in the near future.
Yeah, Ruth's right. I mean, also I've been writing some stay and put training for foster parents, but since we've met today, there are quite a few things I can kind of add to that, especially the Care Leavers Covenant, the UCAS ticking of the box, lots of things. So this has been perfect timing for that.
I think something that I think it's something that I argued for quite strongly as part of the employment pillar at the University of York, which we've all dealt with HR, we know how fun they are, was that as part of the university's offer as an employer was to guarantee an interview to anyone who met the minimum criteria for a job, if they were care experienced. And most importantly, to guarantee feedback on their application and interview. And HR pushed back about that so strongly, saying that it'd be difficult for them to support large volumes of this, and then eventually recognise that we're not talking about large volumes, but we are talking about something that we have immense experience in as an employer, and what is a good application, what is a good interview, and that we should be sharing that as good parents.
Can I say briefly, I do have to go, but we are going to share this recording widely with our partner organisations and with anyone who asks us for it, and I know Polaris are going to. So I think actually some of this information that people have just been sharing will be really, really valuable to organisations and to others, and hopefully help people to get to know some of the best practice that's going on. So I do have to go because I'm involved in another presentation now. Thank you all so much. From my perspective, I've learned a lot as well here today, but we will be sharing this, and if anyone wants the copy, if they put it in the question and answers, perhaps Jenny, we can collate that. But thank you, and I'm sorry I have to go.
Thanks, Elaine. Yeah, and to echo that, it has been really, really interesting today, and I just wondered if any of our participants did want to use the Q&A box before we finish. So I might just invite the panel to all share themselves on camera, because then people can see your names if they want to aim a question at you in particular. So if anyone does want to ask a question, you can just pop that in the Q&A box now, and we'll get to those now. Was there anything anyone wanted to add before we start the Q&A?
Yes, if that's okay. Just briefly, if I'm sharing things that people don't know about. I'll share one more and see if you know about it. In terms of support for care experience people at university, there is a very, very good website. It's set up by the charity Become. It is called Propel. If you just Google Propel Care Leaver, Care Experience, any kind of combination of those things, you'll find it. What Propel does is it collates information from every university across a standard set of support measures. And it gives you the dedicated contact at the institution, the person who's responsible for supporting care experience people. It lists the support that is available across a range of standard categories, things like 365-day accommodation. It covers all universities and most colleges in the UK. It is an amazing website. It's really well done by Become. Anybody who's trying to support young people looking at universities, you can't go wrong by looking there.
Thank you. At the moment, we've just got comments. People are saying that it's been very helpful and they're asking for a copy of the recording, which will be shared, of course. So if I don't get to that response, we will share that with people who have popped that in the Q&A. Are there any questions for the panel? We have one here. So Karen is asking, are there any differences in support for children with disabilities? I have twins with FASD, only 12 at present, but feel that they will need much more support as they are very young for their age. I'm not sure which panel member would like to potentially answer that question.
I mean, I can answer it from a university perspective. So from a university perspective, first of all, there's discrete support for students with disabilities, and under the Equalities Act, all institutions must do that. We must look at data and outcomes for anyone with any of the protected characteristics under the Equalities Act. But also in kind of my geeky day job, what we really like to look at is what we call intersections. So that's when you look at two different characteristics that might make access difficult or success difficult, and you look at how, when you put those things together, how they might create additional support that's required. So yes, universities do have lots of support for lots of discrete things, but also lots of support when you combine things that might make it quite difficult. And most institutions would list that support available on their website, but it is, again, huge and a massive range of various things across institutions.
Thank you. Kate is saying, this is not really a question, but I just really wanted to thank the panel for sharing their views and experiences. But they're very, very pleased to have heard all of this today. And we've had a few comments similar to that. So thank you so much to our panel. I'll just give a few more minutes for questions, and then we will wrap up the webinar today. So yeah, thank you for the positive comments as well. Of course, if people do think of questions that they'd like to ask afterwards, the email address for Hannah is on the advert, and I believe the university email address is on there as well, so you can always make contact with us that way, and we will share the recording as we've said. I can't see any further questions coming through. Okay, we've got Julie who's asking what assistance is available for less academic young people?
Okay, so universities traditionally you might think of as academic institutions, because very much are. I think we've seen a step away from that in recent years, and I think what we see now is a lot of institutions offering things like foundation years to allow people to build up those academic skills that are generic across a whole set of things. But you also see institutions looking as employers at what they can do, offering apprenticeships, those kind of things that will allow you to access some of that kind of knowledge that might then lead on to more academic qualifications. What we also have, and most institutions would adhere to, is something that we call recognition of prior learning. And recognition of prior learning is essentially where if you're trying to access a course and maybe you're a few years after you did your formal qualifications and didn't do particularly great in those, but you've spent the last 3 years working in children's social care and you're applying to a social work degree, perhaps that experience is actually relevant to your course, shockingly, and universities will now make a move to recognise that experience as essentially a formal entrance requirement, working instead of an A-level, instead of a GCSE, to allow you to access a course. And then once you're on a course, same support that every other student gets, that universities want to transform lives, we want to see people do better, and we have a whole range of support, things like academic writing skills, study centres, math skills, those kind of things that are just generically available across all institutions.
Speaking for myself, I actually did a foundation course to get into university. So I finished school at 16, couldn't wait to escape. And then a number of years later, kind of thought to myself, well, actually, maybe it's not all bad. So I found the foundation year at the university I attended an amazing experience. It was a really good way of taking somebody who didn't really consider himself to be overly academic when he left school and giving me that really good transition and cushion to get me into university. I certainly wouldn't have dreamed of going straight into a first year of a degree, but that foundation year just gave me the skills and the confidence that I needed to be able to progress. So I would wholeheartedly recommend those to anybody that's considering university but not 100% certain. The other really good thing about it was at the university I went to, you had to do units that were not linked to the course that you'd applied for, and actually caused me to change the course that I did at the end of that year, which is why I've now been a science teacher for 20 odd years as opposed to a history teacher. So, you know, it's little things like that that are really, really useful. In terms of our two boys, they certainly are in no position at the moment where they're ready or would consider going to university. So I think things like the covenant that Chris spoke about, and making that more open and making foster carers more aware of that is a great start place. I think sort of the training of the personal advisors to be aware of that, and also the work that Ruth has sort of said she's doing in terms of apprenticeships. I think those are the things that really, really are going to be vital to helping those young people who aren't as academic or who are academic but actually want to take a different route. And there's also obviously a lot of vocational options out there nowadays as well. So it's maybe making sure that fostering agencies maybe have somebody who is their educational and transition expert who are aware of all of these things and can guide young people in the right way, which I assume is kind of the role that Ruth is now taking up. So I look forward to seeing what's going to be happening there in the future as well.
Thank you. Okay, I don't think that, oh, we have another comment or question. Bear with me a second. Okay. So Kelly agrees that she did a foundation degree year and said it helped more than just jumping into a degree. She left school at 16 and went on to university at 37 and is still ongoing. So she feels everyone should do it, as colleges do not always prepare people for university. Thank you for that comment, Kelly. Okay.
And I think just to add on the foundation years, it really is something that's recognised as being something that's very useful to people who, I don't like to say not academic really. I think Greg's more right that they've just not found the right thing for them or not engaged with it in the right way just yet, and that when they find themselves, they really do. And I think a demonstration of that is, I mentioned earlier, the geeky thing about access and participation plans, but one of the institutions that started heavily offering foundation years as one of the access routes to them was Oxford. I think that tells us how valuable those things can be in accessing what we can all recognise as quite an academic institution.
Thank you so much. So we have 3 minutes to spare. So we've timed that very, very well. Thank you so much to the panel today. And thank you, Hannah, for bringing this together as well today with us. It's been really informative, and I do hope, I just have one more comment. And I'm a sucker for it, aren't I? So I'm just going to read this one out and then I will finish at this point, everyone. So Tracy is saying that her foster daughter has turned 18 and is going to university in September. She's worked incredibly hard to get where she has got to, but it seems as soon as she reached 18, the support she got just doesn't continue, even though she's still in education and still living at home, and nothing else has changed in her life. So in response to that, I think we really hope that we see some really good things come from this review. Thank you. So yes, I'm going to end it there, everyone. It's been really, it's been lovely. It's been such a pleasure to meet you all and speak with you all today. And many people have found it very useful. So hopefully we'll see some really good practice moving forward. Does anyone